What is white privilege? I mean, when I even heard the term, I was confused. Like, I just based on the vocabulary. And you turn on the TV, you see it. You see it in headlines. Everybody's talking about white privilege, but what is it really? Like, I like to know the context of things and the definition, so I'm clear, right? And the first time I heard the term white privilege, one of my friends brought it up to me. I literally got defensive and I said, nobody's handed me anything. I've worked for everything in my life. So I want to share a story with you. And it's the story of a time I made a very inappropriate joke about myself. And it offended some of the people that were at a networking event. They were colleagues that I respected deeply. I wasn't aware at the time. Now I am. So the joke I made was in reference to having a ghetto booty. Well, most people would think that that was really funny and self-deprecating, which is what I thought. I was making fun of myself. I was quickly corrected by a colleague who let me know that that was highly inappropriate, offensive, and racist. I consider myself an anti-racist. And at the time, I was deeply upset, embarrassed, overcome with shame at the idea that I had offended my colleagues that I respected in any way, shape, or form, or anybody else in my life that I love dearly and happens to be Black. I spoke to a friend about the issue and the situation, and she very kindly and patiently explained that what I actually was dealing with was something called white fragility. Now, this story really illustrates white privilege at work. So, what is white privilege? I mean, when I even heard the term, I was confused. Like, I just based on the vocabulary. And you turn on the TV, you see it. You see it in headlines. Everybody's talking about white privilege, but what is it really? Like, I like to know the context of things and the definition, so I'm clear, right? And the first time I heard the term white privilege, one of my friends brought it up to me and I literally got defensive and I said, nobody's handed me anything. I've worked for everything in my life, blah, 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 blah. She, of course, kindly and patiently let me go on my rant and my tangent. And she said, yes, but Kelly, you don't walk in grocery stores and are followed around based on the color of your skin. And it literally clicked into place for me. I was like, oh, that's what white privilege is. So let's explore that. Because white privilege is literally a loaded term in our society. To some, it carries connotations of blame and fault. And although having it is not the same as endorsing it or having created it, to others, it seems dismissive of their hardships, right? Just like the way I reacted when I first heard it. Though their life has been easy, like everything's been easy. They haven't had to struggle. They haven't had to work on things. It's dismissive of their accomplishments. And it's also, it brings the energy that they don't deserve the things that they have, right? And it like usurps any of the effort or struggles that they've put in to get what they have, right? It's that word, privilege, that I think people get hung up on, or I know people get hung up on, because I did, right? So when we feel as though someone is suggesting or something along these lines, our instinctive reaction is to object, defend, explain, or justify things. That's what I did. And language is everything. For a long time, I've had a love affair with the English language. So language and our words create our reality. So to better understand privilege, we need to explore the responsibility and what privileges are afforded to the group. And the group we're talking about is the whites, right? And it's the privileges that are afforded to one group over another. That's what white privilege is. That's the essence of it, right? How are we afforded access and other things that other groups are not, based on the color of our skin? What can we as white people do about white privilege? I think the first thing is education. It's really understanding what it is, where it came from, what it's rooted in, and what the consequences are in having white privilege. The whole reason why I put this series together was to understand it. And I think the second thing has to be taking steps of being an anti-racist. That is to be completely against everything that speaks to racism and breathes life into the system and perpetuates it, gives it life. I think the third thing is to understand the real connotations of white privilege and how deeply it actually runs. It's insidious. It's rooted in everything. It's rooted in everything that all the systems, policies, and beliefs that we have is what's informing and keeping white privilege alive. Let me give you a couple examples of white privilege. And like I said, I think the word privilege is where people get hung up. It's really white access or white advantage. It's kind of like skipping to the front of the line when there are hundreds of people waiting for the thing. I've been throwing around the term social distancing, right, since the beginning of March when the pandemic came in, right? It's not really social distancing. They don't want us to stop socializing. It's physical distance. They want us to keep our distance from each other. So I think the connotation of the word privilege and in the context of social distancing is wrong. It doesn't convey what the actual context is. I used to brag in my 20s that there was one year where I talked my way out of 11 speeding tickets. 11. I talked my way out of it. Now, I believe, especially in the context of police brutality now, if I was a Black woman, there is no way that would happen. There is no way. I think white privilege affords us access, advantages. I don't get followed around in a store. I don't get questioned about my education and where I came from. I don't get questioned about whether or not I came from a broken home or lived in a less than favorable neighborhood. I didn't get questioned on my mortgage about whether or not I could afford it. Let's get some statistics, okay? And of course, as always, the links are in the description box below because I invite you to consider clicking on these links, looking at them yourself, absorbing the statistics, exploring deeper if you want to, and make the decision on your own. So let's start with the war on drugs. Black kids are 10 times more likely to be arrested for drug crimes than white kids, even though white kids are more likely to abuse drugs. Black people ages 18 to 25 are less likely than whites to have used marijuana in the last 12 months. Black people are less than 13% of the US population. Let me say that again. Black people are less than 13% of the US population. They make up only 14% of regular drug users, and they are 37% of those arrested for drug offenses. Black arrest rates for marijuana possession are astronomically higher, and the disparity is only getting worse, despite the fact that marijuana is legalized in many of our states for recreation and medical use. Black people are 21% more likely to receive a mandatory minimum sentence than whites. Black people are 20% more likely to be sentenced to prison than whites. The sentencing gap has widened in recent years since judicial discretion was returned by the Supreme Court in 2005. Quote, prison sentences of Black men were nearly 20% longer than those of white men for similar crimes in recent years. 2/3 of criminals receiving life sentences are non-white in the state of New York. It's 83%. The U.S. is one of only 3 of the 34 OECD nations to give fewer resources and have lower teacher-student ratios in poorer communities than in more privileged communities. In New York, the value of the poorest 10% of school districts was $287,000 per student. In the richest districts, That number was 1.9 million per student. 1.9 million versus 287,000. Only 17 states provide more funding to high poverty districts than to low poverty districts. And here's a Georgetown University study that found the same racial divide is repeated in higher education. The post-secondary system mimics and magnifies the racial and ethnic inequality in educational preparation it inherits from the K through 12 system, and then projects this inequality into the labor market. You see how everything's feeding each other? And now we're looking at housing, okay? Because racism, again, we know racism is a system, not an event or a person. These are all the systems that are racist, okay? So let's look at housing. So Black families making $100,000 typically live in the kinds of neighborhoods inhabited by white families making $30,000. Subprime loans were given to 41.5% of Black and 30.9% of Latinx borrowers, but only 17.8% of whites. Among high-income borrowers in 2006, African Americans were 3 times as likely as whites to pay higher prices for mortgages, 32.1% compared to 10.5%. Latinx were nearly as likely as African Americans to pay higher prices for their mortgages at 29.1%. Now let's talk about wealth, okay? Because inherited wealth plays a huge factor in this disparity. The average net worth of Black households is $6,314 compared to $110,500 for the average white household. You see the disparity? Numbers don't lie. While a college-educated white American has an average net worth of $75,000, a college-educated Black American has an average net worth of less than $17,500. The Black-white wealth gap is greater in the United States today than it was in South Africa in 1970 at the height of apartheid. We also incarcerate a higher percentage of Blacks today than apartheid in South Africa did. So I want to emphasize this. We're way beyond, I'm not racist, my family is not racist, I'm friends with et cetera, which makes me not racist because I have proximity to people of color. This is not personal. It's not a personal attack. What we're exploring here are the systems, procedures, and policies that are working against Black people, Latinx, anybody who's not white, and working in favor of the white culture and the white community. That's what white privilege is. It's the advantage. It's the advantage. It's the access. It's getting to the front of the line. So all of these advantages are afforded to the white culture based on the lack of color in the skin. It's the systems, it's the policies, it's the procedures, it's all of these things that have been propped up by the white culture to give us an unfair advantage. It's inequitable. In reflection, this is the whole reason why I created this series. And here's what I've learned. I have an advantage based on what I look like. I mean, I never, until I started exploring this and really digging deep, I would say starting with George Floyd's murder, on Memorial Day of this year, I didn't even have to think that I was white. I didn't even have to think about that, whereas people who are Black or people that are Latinx or people that are immigrants think about it every day. It's something that occupies space in their brain, their psyche, their emotional space. It's a constant reminder. I didn't have to think about that. I don't have to have conversations with my children about how to behave in front of a police officer. All of those are privileges. It's rebooting my mind. Okay, so think about it this way. You can't erase or unlearn racism, but what you can do is reload your brain, kind of like putting new software on a computer and upgrading it, right? So it's Kelly's Brain 2.0. That's what we're doing through this education. And it helps you think differently when you explore the history of our country. So the systems that we operate in, the racist systems, were set up by white male slave owners to benefit them. And we still operate within them today. Think about this. This country was colonized in 1776, and we've never questioned it. We've never questioned the systems and policies that are in place. So in conclusion, it's my intention that I've inspired you to educate yourself, to maybe think differently about things. Hopefully I opened your eyes to things you were unaware of and pulled back the curtain and shined light on issues in our country that are literally leading to the desecration and deaths of an entire race. I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me, and stay tuned for our next series. Make it a great day.